apple tree on its own roots. When you buy a fruit tree, you're almost certainly going to buy a tree that's been grafted. That is, a tree in which the variety, the top part of the tree, is grafted onto a rootstock, which will be a genetically different organism. So in fact, you'll have, when you buy a grafted tree, you're buying two separate trees, two separate genetic individuals. On a grafted tree, you'll usually get a kink in the stem where the variety is grafted on, and this being an own root tree, you can see it's a perfectly straight stem until it starts branching. There is no grafted on rootstock with the own root tree. Why bother? Well, there are a lot of advantages to the own root fruit tree. One is generally much better health and resistance. It doesn't make the tree immune to diseases, pests and so on, but the tree will have a much more increased resistance to pests and diseases, and also to drought and in bad conditions. Another point in the own root tree is that the fruit quality is unaffected by the rootstock, and so is naturally, as it should be, the correct size, shape and so on for the variety. And also we tend to find there's better flavour, better storage life and better fertility with the, for the tree itself, so that you'll find fruits from own root trees will have more seeds, indicating better pollination, and also we suspect that the cell fertility of the tree is much increased. So disadvantages. Well, there's only one disadvantage to a tree on its own roots, and that's that it will grow to the size which is natural for the variety, and in most cases that's a bit bigger than we usually want as a cropping garden tree. In fact, the average tree on its own roots will grow to a bigger size than on rootstock MM106, a bit bigger all round. Not a lot bigger than average, but we can't go any more dwarf than that. So how do we keep there are various techniques for keeping the vigour of the tree, the own root tree, under control. The first is to induce cropping as soon as possible, and this is done by not overfeeding, not over-irrigating, and generally encouraging the tree to produce fruit buds rather than make a lot of wood. Once we've got the tree cropping, no, forget that bit. The basic training of the tree also helps induce early cropping. What we'll do is we'll tie this tree down so the branches are virtually horizontal, like this, which will increase fruit bud formation along the horizontal sides of the shoots. And we'll also only prune in the summer. Summer pruning induces the remaining buds to form fruit buds and prevents vigorous regrowth of wood, which is what happens when you winter prune. There are several other useful functions of an own root tree. One is that it's movable, that unlike a grafted tree, you could actually, even an established own root tree, you could dig it up, even with a JCB, you could dig it up, reduce the size of the top, so we're looking at a fairly short stem, and replant, and it will grow perfectly well, happily and naturally after that. Another advantage, because of the flexibility of planting, which you have when you don't have a rootstock and a graft union, is that the tree can be planted deeply, and this means the tree can be used in areas where damage from gales or vandals, structural damage to the tree is quite likely. Then we can plant deeper than we would do normally, and possibly even bury the lowest branches like these, so that there is greater resistance to it being pulled up, and the tree can offer better resistance to vandalism and physical damage. If it's reduced to its roots and the roots regrow, of course what regrows is purely the variety that we started out with. As there's no rootstock, the roots themselves are the same variety as this and will produce exactly the same fruits. This ability of the tree to regrow from its roots or from its stump and carry on being exactly the same variety is the basis of the coppicing of own root trees, and that is the basis of the coppice orchard, which is what we'll look at next. Here I am standing in the coppice orchard. As it's fairly new, the trees are just a year or two old, and basically if you look around, what you'll see is a great density of vegetables, and the trees themselves aren't very obvious yet at their age. But you may see from this end of the row we have the apple, hazelnut, there's a pear going where the white stick is, another apple, and another apple at the bottom. The essence of the coppice orchard is that it's a complete growing system. It's not just an orchard, it's not just a vegetable growing system. Essentially what we try to do in the coppice orchard is recreate a productive woodland, and the coppice element is equivalent to the woodland clearing, so that we can grow high light crops, high light demanding crops. We grow the light demanding vegetables as long as there is sufficient light in the coppice orchard, and the light will diminish year by year as the trees get bigger and bigger and throw more and more shade. There comes a point where there may not be enough good light to grow all the vegetables we need. At that point we'll choose a north-south row in the coppice orchard to coppice to let the light back in again. This might happen after 8, 10, 12 years. It will just depend on local conditions and how much vegetables we need, etc. When the row is coppiced and it's north-south to let the sun back in, which in most parts of Europe is quite useful because the prevailing winds tend to be from the west, so we not only get a glade which is well lit with good light, but we also get wind protection from the westerly winds and from easterly winds. This means we have a hot spot, so our vegetable growing is enhanced by very good temperature and wind conditions. If we grow the vegetables on a no-dig and mulching system, there'll be minimum damage to the tree roots, and it should be quite possible for the trees and the vegetables to coexist quite happily. As the trees, after coppicing, the trees will regrow, and we estimate that from a coppice position, fruiting should start again after about 3 or 4 years. We need to verify this and to find out what differences there are between different varieties of trees and how they perform differently because of varietal differences. So the trees will again get bigger and bigger, will again become a closed canopy, shading out vegetables, and so we coppice again after that period, and the whole cycle starts again. Right, now we've got to do the alternate row bit. We only coppice one row in the first year, and we coppice another row in the second year. For this system to work at its most efficient and keep the wind off and maximise fruit bud production, the optimum row to cut, the best row to cut after the first row isn't a row which is next to it, but an alternate row which is 2 rows away. This gives us, over time, a series of avenues and glades so that we have the optimum conditions for plant growth throughout the system. The aim of the coppice orchard is to try and provide all the nutrition it needs for the plant from within the system. so that we're looking at returning as much as possible to the system in terms of kitchen wastes, in terms of wood ashes, and in terms of human manure. The main input of nitrogen to the coppice orchard will be from nitrogen fixing plants, and that will include shrubs like the Coeleagnus, some of our crop plants like these lupins, and ground covers like the white clover. You may well be wondering what the Coeleagnus is doing in an orchard. It's not a typical orchard plant. The orchard actually devotes about 1 in 9 of its tree spaces to tree and shrub nitrogen producers. These will include alders, robinia, our friends the Coeleagnuses, and gorse, broom, whatever suits your local soils. The 1 in 9 is useful as it means on a square plan there are 8 trees around the nitrogen producers which can benefit. When we coppice north-south row in the orchard, we'll be coppicing the nitrogen producers too, and with the woody nitrogen producers, that will mean there will be a huge amount of nitrogen being released in the soil after coppicing, because the trees and shrubs will no longer be able to support those nodules on their roots, so they'll let them go. But this means, particularly after coppicing, we have to make sure we have enough winter active plants to absorb the nitrogen that will be released. So long-term plants through the winter, which are active through the winter, like foxgloves, nettles, or crop plants like leeks or brassicas, will be very useful around our nitrogen fixers. If we decide which row we're going to coppice first, then the idea within the coppice orchard to maximise nutrition is, in the year preceding coppicing, we move all our spare mulch material, our chopped up plant material, fallen branches, leaves, etc., to that row, so that when we coppice that row for vegetable production, we'll have maximised the fertility available on the site, as well as maximising the light available.